Andrew Burt, co-founder of BNH.ai, the first law firm that focuses on AI analytics and machine learning, of which, full disclosure, I am an advisor. Welcome back to the Data Exchange podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
Um, so, first of all, you're about 1 year into BNH.ai, the law firm. So, how has the year been? Has the original thesis behind the law firm uh, lived up to expectation?
Yeah, I mean, I think 100%. We started out understanding that there were real kind of core problems in the world of data science and AI. AI was being adopted with more and more enthusiasm, and yet there are all of these core risks and core liabilities that are really legal in nature at their core. And so that was our thesis. We had spent years working in this space beforehand, but we'd obviously never done this as a law firm. No one has ever done this as a law firm. And so I think just to talk about kind of the timeline is, we announced right at the beginning of the pandemic. In fact, we had a big announcement at South by Southwest in a talk I was going to give, which ended up being canceled. So the first kind of couple months were very rocky for us, kind of as a time to launch a new venture. But I would say very shortly thereafter, the work really started picking up, and we have had a very, very serious and growing list of clients and projects and matters since really kind of early on in our life cycle.
So, do you folks only so most of the people that you are engaged with now already have machine learning models in production, or can you come in before they even do that?
I would say it's a mix. And I think one of the surprises and one of the interesting things is that there's no single customer or client profile for us. We have clients in all industries, all shapes and sizes. And I would say, at one end, we have some clients that are just starting to seriously invest in AI, and they don't have AI models in production, but they know that they can't afford to have their AI get them into trouble. And so they're doing the very strategic, intelligent thing, which we would recommend, which is think about and invest in risk and liability minimization before something goes wrong. We sometimes say, don't wait for the fire.
They are the anti-Silicon Valley, move fast and break things, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some senses, but the truth is, and that phrase itself, it kind of, I don't know, it kills me a little bit inside, because when you move fast and break things, things break. And if you want to, that is like a truism. It's a very clear. And if you're doing something that's important, if you're working in any sector or making decisions that are important at a societal level, which I think many data scientists want to do, breaking things is not something to celebrate. It's a liability. It can get you fined. It can bring very bad things happen when things break. If what you're doing is very important,
your brand can suffer tremendously.
Your brand can suffer. You can hurt consumers, and so I think what you really want, and the goal should be finding some type of balance between moving fast and also minimizing risk. And so what you really want to do is move fast and maybe only break a few things, or try not to break many things. So I would just say that we have some clients where we come in and it's not so fun. The data scientists have a hard time slowing down. But by the end of those engagements, I hope, and what we really try to do is illustrate why, if you actually want to innovate, if you actually want to do important things with your models, with AI, you can't just think about accuracy. You can't just think about only business value and then leave the security, leave the privacy, leave the fairness concerns until later. And so ideally, we want to encourage innovation, and we actually think this, what we're doing, is a critical part of innovating with AI. But it is, I mean, culturally, that is something that's pretty rampant.
So are you comfortable just at a high level, without naming names, just sketching out some representative use cases?
Yeah, happily. And I should say, one of the things we end up explaining a lot over and over to our clients who are our data scientists, and typically we get brought in by a mix of data scientists and lawyers, but we explain the way that legal privilege works. We explain why law firms engage with clients differently. And so once a company or an organization retains a law firm, that law firm is legally obliged to do what's in their client's best interest. So we have to be very careful. And you're right, we can't say anything that could be kind of potentially identifying. But yeah, happily. I mean, I think at a high level, I'll just give you a couple examples. We're working with one healthcare client that has yet to very seriously deploy AI, but their data scientists and some of their legal folks are already asking questions. For example, how do we know when we're comfortable deploying a model that might have some type of discriminatory impact? And so what is fairness, basically? How do we know a model is fair? What tests do we perform? And so we have come in and kind of built for this company a framework for here's how you should test, here's how you should think about fairness as it relates to both your models and legal standards.
But
And basically, yeah.
Andrew, let's stay with this point. So fairness itself, I think the people who do machine learning research have found is a kind of a tricky thing to define, right? So there's no universally accepted procedure for certifying something is fair. So when you folks come in, do you make that clear and you say, so here are the things that you can do, but there's no 100% guarantee?
Yeah, I mean, that's the art, frankly, to being a lawyer. And when we look, frankly, when I look at a lot of the academic and the research literature on fairness and ML, some of it is very frustrating to me because lawyers have been dealing with these issues for decades. There are 5 decades of precedent and case law about how to think about fairness in an employment context or a credit context. And so the fact that there's not one single answer does not mean that organizations can't make progress. It does not mean that we can't give concrete guidance on what to do. And so there's a lot that can be done. What we typically do, I mean, the truth is that fairness is context dependent, and there are many different ways of thinking about fairness that actually conflict. And so what we will advise is basically you want to think about fairness from a context-specific example, and you want to think about the types of harms that might be arising from whatever the model use case is. And so there's some models, for example, where you should be really worried about a false positive. There are some models where you should be very worried about a false negative. And so what you really want to do from a legal perspective, and I'm trying to not go too deep into the rabbit hole here, but from a legal perspective, what you want to do is document the risks. You want to document how you have addressed those risks. And you want to make sure that there's no basically viable alternative way. There's no way to get the same or similar business value out of your model without decreasing whatever the risks are that you should be most worried about.
So let me play devil's advocate here. So what if I do what you described, document the risks? Why do I need a law firm?
There are a bunch of reasons. I think. Well, I mean, so to be fair, we are a boutique law firm. Our goal is to help and then leave. So there are some cases where it's possible that people don't need law firms. To this day, we have yet to find a case where someone needs help and they don't need our services. I think the first answer, there are a couple answers. The first is that fairness is a very, very kind of profoundly legal concept. If you're asking the question, do I care if my model is fair? Chances are there's a law that applies to you. And if not, chances are that you might be subject to legal oversight regardless. We actually see a lot of letters from state attorneys general who are conducting investigations. There are just a huge amount of fairness standards at the federal level, and then at the state, local, and municipal level that apply to all of these things. And then I would also say one of the things that makes our kind of job both fun, but a little bit different, is that lawyers engage under legal privilege. We, as lawyers, as a law firm, have a different type of relationship to our clients, where we are, again, legally mandated to do what's in their best interest. And so anytime you're an organization and you think there might be something we're doing that's wrong, there could be something that could create liability, could create issues, you want lawyers involved. Lawyers are kind of structurally built to be able to have conversations under privilege. I mean, that's really that's what lawyers exist to do. They exist to go into organizations, figure out what the liability might be, and then provide advice as to how to fix it. And so that legal component is really central to what we do, even for clients who don't yet know the exact laws they're worried about. We will come in through that framework of what are the laws that apply to you now, and what do we think the laws that might apply to you in the future, what do we think those would look like, and how should you react to them?
I see. But so do you think that actually, are you seeing, and if not, maybe we can speculate. Do you think that some of these top management consulting firms are going to get into this responsible AI and AI risk practice?
Yeah,
I'm not going to name them, but our listeners will know who they are.
I think so. I mean, I think this is an area that's really, really ripe for growth. I think, frankly,
but then Andrew, with that said, like you said, so they're not lawyers, right? So even if they can give you advice, but it falls short of the kind of legal advice you just described.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And I can't. I'm not sure how much is public yet, so I'm going to kind of refrain. But we actually have been involved with one of the top companies in that space to help them do exactly that, which is their client base has all of these problems, and yet a very central part of it, not all of the work, but a very central part of it ends up being legal. And so they need a law firm that is both, legal, as law firms are, and also highly technically sophisticated. And so we have actually been playing that role.
So the overarching umbrella term that I'm seeing people use is responsible AI. So does that kind of cover? I imagine it covers the types of risks that you folks are dealing with, but in terms of what you are seeing out there when you talk to and hearing when you talk to clients. So you mentioned fairness, right? So is fairness number one among their concerns? So how would you rank the different areas of responsible AI in terms of client concern? Not your concern, but the concern of the people you're talking to.
I would say so. So there are a bunch of different areas. I would say that it really, for us, tends to start with fairness for a bunch of different reasons. Regulators are concerned about fairness. It has gotten a lot of attention at the C-suite level. So very frequently, chief data scientists, chief data officers are concerned about fairness, or they're at least being asked those types of questions. But it frequently kind of, I don't want to say spirals, it evolves into something a lot more holistic. So there's fairness, privacy, security, transparency, accountability. I would highlight, so I think fairness tends to be first among equals, so to speak, for our clients. We also see third-party risk as a major source of concern.
Define that.
So there are two types of third-party risk that we see. One is just it's very rare for any model, like the end model that goes into a production environment, to be completely developed soup to nuts by one group of internal data scientists. There's frequently third-party data involved, third-party packages, third-party vendors, the deployment infrastructure. There are all sorts of ways that third parties get involved into the training and deployment and maintenance of any given model. And so there are a whole host of issues that can come into play just in terms of aligning all the different risk management practices. Privacy is a very I think, concrete one, which is frequently data scientists really don't know how well the data has been anonymized, what the consent levels have been. The FTC recently actually shut down an entire model just because of that. And so, so that ends up being a big issue. And then on the other hand, for some of our really large clients, they are doing acquisitions of different companies all over the place, many of which are focused on AI. And so they will also be kind of incorporating into their larger companies third-party startups, and they can run into all sorts of different issues. And to go back to the move fast and break things, we frequently see that is that like it's pervasive in startup culture. Data scientists, frankly, don't like to think about risk. It's ambiguous. It's not binary. It's not typically what they're trained to do. And so in these smaller, fast-moving startup environments, they'll be building and deploying models and have a whole kind of, framework for deploying AI that just will really give risk and liability and privacy and security and fairness a backseat. And then so suddenly these larger companies that are a lot more worried about laws and non-compliance are responsible. And so we've come in to help some of our clients in that sense as well.
So is it fair to say that the companies who are most likely to engage with a firm like BNH.ai come from the more regulated industries? So I'm thinking healthcare and finance, or is this more widespread than I think?
It's more widespread than you think. I mean, I think it makes sense, right? Healthcare, finance, but at the same time, what we are really seeing, and I would actually say the majority of our client base at this point is outside of those industries. It's very hard.
So give me one more anonymized use case of something that's outside finance and healthcare.
Yeah, happily. So I'll actually, so we have a number of very large technology companies. And I'll give you one example from one of those, which is they had a whistleblower. So all, companies throughout different sectors are adopting and deploying AI. And this company is no exception. But given the recent political environment, it comes as no surprise that people are a lot more kind of heightened to issues of inequity and inequality. And they had an internal whistleblower that basically brought to the attention of the company the racial disparities, potential racial disparities related to one of the models they were deploying. And so that has been a very
this whistleblower didn't go to the media, just internally.
Exactly. They didn't go to the media. And it's actually interesting because a lot of what we do is AI incident response. Something bad happens, we get called in, we basically say, these are your liabilities, here's how to fix them from a technical perspective. Have a good day, call us if we can help. And so a lot of our work is related to that. But it's been interesting, this company in particular, but it's happened elsewhere where the actual incident is a whistleblower, which is actually good. Frankly, it's a success story to have someone internal to the company raise a red flag before the model gets deployed, before it actually inflicts harms on any users. And I'll actually I'll talk briefly about another incident we were involved in with a different client in a completely different industry, just to kind of highlight how important and frankly scary some of this can be, which is we were called in to help with a model that was trained by something like 4 or 5 data scientists, a big team, compared to many different data science departments. But in the scheme of things, a very small team. It had an impact on tens of millions of Americans over the last few years. And this client discovered that it was pretty significantly discriminatory. And so we came in to try to help
So fix the model. They audited themselves later on and found this.
Yeah, I don't want to get into any of the more details, but they found out that they had this major problem. And I think one of the things that was surprising for us, and we know this, but it's just surprising to see, is coming into a group of such small, 4 or 5 individuals, data scientists, and watching them realize the impact that their models had on society. Like something they built could reach out and touch this many millions of Americans and contribute to inequities. And so kind of helping them and watching them grapple with the impact of their work and how to fix it has been really interesting. But I think I want to highlight that for your listeners, because I think it's very, very easy as a data scientist just to really optimize for kind of time to value. How quickly can you get your model into production? And then accuracy. How accurate can I make my model? And very frequently, those are really kind of the only 2 things that data scientists optimize for. But if you kind of take a step back and realize the impact these models are having, I think it becomes a lot more important and clearer to kind of have a more expansive view of the data scientist's role.
But I imagine, Andrew, you folks are not brought in by the data science team or data scientists, right? So you come in through another part of the company. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, so basically,
So even
so
if
it
I'm
helps.
even if I'm a data scientist concerned about what I'm building, maybe I can escalate it internally and have you brought in, or but chances. So what advice would you give to a data scientist who has this concern? Do they reach out to you directly, or do they navigate their internal org structure?
No, they should. I mean, we've seen all sorts of different things, but what they should do is talk to their lawyer, talk to their in-house counsel, and tell them that that they need help. And then if it's appropriate to bring in an outside counsel like us, then we can come in. But the first step involves raising this to legal and also explaining that this is a legal issue. Very frequently, and we've actually seen that same kind of chain of events happen multiple times. There's a concern amongst data scientists. They will talk to the lawyers. Lawyers are not, we're unique. BNH is unique in the sense that we're both technical and legal. So lawyers, in-house counsel is frequently intimidated by these questions. But as soon as they understand kind of what the stakes are and what the issue is, sometimes those discussions have involved where the data scientist going and basically saying, we need to bring in BNH. And then that's what the discussion centers on. But we as outside counsel end up going in through the lawyers. But at the end of the day, our job is to work very closely with the data scientists to address the issue, to actually build and give advice that is practical and operational. And then also, very importantly, to make sure that from a legal standpoint, everything makes sense.
And interesting. So so are lawyers do you think going to be eventually, do you think if you're a company that uses a lot of ML, will you have an internal BNH, a lawyer who specializes in this? Do you think
You're actually
yeah. So do you think that some of these companies that are really heavily engaged in machine learning, they will have some sort of internal equivalent of BNH?
We actually see that all over the place. It feels like a trend that is really just starting. We might call it like the rise of the AI Council. But we see throughout a pretty significant number of our clients, that's an actual title, Senior Counsel AI, Senior Counsel AI and Product, ML Platform. These are some of the kind of titles that we see. And it's because these issues, organizations all over the place are investing in AI and ML, and they are also realizing that liability is a very core concern. And so,
and some companies actually have teams of lawyers, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that they would assign a subgroup to specialize in this, right?
Yeah, honestly, I think we are with AI in a very similar position to where companies were with cybersecurity and privacy 10 years ago, where everyone was aware this is a coming issue. There were breaches, there were incidents all over the place, and they were really just starting to kind of get their act together organizationally, putting the right teams and folks into place. So yeah, we see that within the in-house counsel. There is a role or responsibility. Someone is getting kind of tapped on the shoulder and being told they're being hired into being responsible for ensuring that all the things companies are doing with AI doesn't get them into trouble.
So then the next step there, then once you have an internal lawyer who's specializing in these issues, is to give them some technical resources, like maybe one or two data scientists.
Yeah, honestly, so what we have seen is that companies, and I should actually say, just to, I can fuel some of the skepticism, is that we see really two things. So two paths, one of which ends with us, the other one doesn't. Companies that are serious about AI and strategic and aware of the risks, they will put like a lawyer to think about these issues, give them responsibility, give them budget, maybe even give them a team. And then frequently, they bring us in to basically help be their experts, to help back them up from a legal and a technical perspective. Interestingly, we are also seeing something.
Or just generally for our listeners, lawyers always consult external counsels.
Yes, it's
right?
very common. Yes, yes.
Even if they have the expertise, they still consult, right?
Well, yes. And the reason why is because being a lawyer and like understanding and synthesizing all the different laws and legal developments is very difficult. And so the best way to do it is you have someone internally who's responsible and who has the baseline foundational knowledge, and then outside counsel who provides guidance to all of those different types of roles.
Who sees more of a cross section of examples, right? So.
Exactly. So outside counsel will then provide that expertise and guidance to in-house counsel. So it's just kind of built into the fabric of a lot of the ways corporate in-house legal departments work. So that's exactly right. And so so on the one hand, you have a lawyer who's actually responsible, has budget, is kind of seriously set up to address these issues. And we very frequently come in there. Interestingly, though, there is another kind of fork in this path where it looks the exact same, and organizations, and we actually see this quite a lot, organizations will hire someone and give them a title like head of ethical AI or director of ethical AI. Sometimes
there's a lot of those now, right? So.
Exactly. And in fact, Algorithm Watch did this wonderful study calling AI ethics guidelines paper tigers. We're basically arguing, not so subtly, that these are marketing campaigns. And we actually see that. We have seen when this responsibility is given to someone outside of the general counsel's office, to someone who kind of has an ambiguous reporting structure, there's not much they can do. There's a very, very hard limit on how effective they can be. And so we actually see that as like a very clear failure mode for organizations that are trying to get serious about responsible AI.
So before we started recording this podcast, you mentioned a title that I'd never heard of, product counsel. So explain that to our listeners.
So that's actually very common, especially in technology companies. Mm-hmm. But there is as companies grow and create more and more products, there will be a team, typically, sometimes it's just one lawyer, but a team inside a general counsel's office assigned with thinking about product, thinking about all the different liabilities, data protection, contracts. It's a whole range of things. And they'll be just kind of like a product manager will be assigned for thinking about the business case of a product or feature. There is a counterpart lawyer who typically thinks about, many different products and features, but that's their main job, is to make sure new features and existing products don't violate laws.
And the point is that it's the product counsel that you folks are finding yourselves engaging with.
Yes. So typically, either product counsel, who will have like AI will be one of their many different responsibilities, or sometimes organizations will just go hire a lawyer or a team of lawyers specifically to focus on AI. But those tend to be kind of our major points of entry for our clients. And then we work very closely with them, and then obviously the data science team and the frontline practitioners to give guidance and build advice and playbooks that work.
So we talked a little bit about some of the risks: fairness, privacy, security. But there's one that I wanted to mention to you: transparency, because I'm starting to see now in the ML community that they're starting to talk about things like strategic predictions, which is basically a class of techniques that allow you to balance transparency and accuracy. Because basically, I guess the main point is if you are too transparent, then your model gets gamed. But it turns out you mentioned to me that you've written about this as well, right? So tell us about your thoughts about balancing transparency and accuracy.
Yeah, so I write basically a quarterly column for Harvard Business Review on risk and technology and law. And must have been about a year ago, I wrote something called the AI transparency paradox. And the basic idea is that, like anything, there is a trade-off. And so transparency is not necessarily always good. Sometimes if you make a model very transparent, there can be security concerns. It can be easier to game. I think from the legal standpoint, that's something that is very clear. We talked about legal privilege earlier on, where the information you gather and the advice you give isn't discoverable. It's not disclosable in legal proceedings. And we actually see that same kind of transparency paradox all the time, where organizations will have some particular risk. They'll be worried about, I don't know, data breaches. It's actually very common in the world of cybersecurity. They'll be worried about a security risk, and they will ask lawyers to help them look into it because they are very attuned to this paradox, which is that if they find out that there's some risk and they don't fully address it, just that information, just the pure information that there was a risk, can increase their liability. And so there are all sorts of ways. There was a very interesting case against a hospital provider where that's basically what happened. They hired a third-party consultant to look into their security risk. They got this big, voluminous report that said, here are all the things you should be doing better. And then surprise, surprise, a year or two later, there was an actual security incident. And that report was used as evidence against the hospital that basically that they had been negligent, that there was a lot more they could have done. They should have known that there was more that they could have done. And so I think back to just kind of that trade-off, when you are thinking about risk, you need to think about it holistically. And so transparency is very good. Yeah.
There's also a societal trend towards at least consumers inching towards wanting to know more about how some of these models work. Like, how does your recommendation system work? And things like this. And then I actually have a tongue-in-cheek comment about this, which is basically I'll be transparent about my model will be as transparent as my terms of service or my privacy policy.
Yeah, which basically means opaque.
Insane terms of service. Yeah, here's how my model works. 25 pages.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, if the level of transparency is equal to that, you might as well. It's just completely black box.
Although I would say, Andrew, that with models, people might be more motivated to actually read, even if it's 1,000 pages, they'll read it, right?
That's fair.
Terms of service, no one will read the terms of service, right?
Yeah, but that's fair.
But generally, are you sensing that there's more and more on the part of the people who are exposed to these models, that they want a little more, maybe not full transparency, but some heuristics about how a model works?
Yeah, I mean, there are actual legal requirements on that. That some of them exist in the EU, interestingly, in California. The California privacy rights.
This is across the board, not just healthcare and finance.
Yeah. So it's been a very eventful year for all of us, and the November elections. Not that many people were thinking about the privacy referendums at the state level, but in California, the CPRA, the California Privacy Rights Act, was passed via referendum. It'll come into effect next year. And it has an actual provision that says meaningful logic about the information involved in automated decision-making systems. Basically,
Is
there needs to be some form.
is that something that can be meaningful logic? So, oh, who's gonna? What's the measurement?
I can't defend lawyers, or
Yeah.
I should say I can't defend how regulators are approaching this issue. But these are the requirements, and what organizations are going to have to do is
But is
come
this
up with.
something, Andrew, that based on your experience, right now it says meaningful logic, and then someone will publish some kind of what in their mind meaningful logic, and then it gets challenged in the court. So there has to be some case law to understand what meaningful logic means.
I mean, case law wouldn't hurt, but I think from our perspective and what we tell our clients is that it's not as difficult as it sounds. I think what we see is, data scientists, engineers hate the law. It's ambiguous. It's very hard to get to a right answer. But again, like the art to this is what you're really trying to do is create an argument. You're trying to create some defensible argument that you did as best as you could be expected to do under the circumstances. And so what we do is we look to those provisions. Sorry, go for it.
No, but with meaningful logic, would I be able to fulfill meaningful logic by simply saying, yeah, some of the drivers of the model are the following, right? Features. Is that enough?
For this particular provision, I don't think so, but I think it would help. That is the type of explainability requirement that happens in like adverse action decisions in the consumer finance space, where you say you got a bad decision, here are the 4 reasons why. And that's very helpful and very important. But I think for this provision in particular, it's also important to explain basically how the model works at a high level. You don't need to go on like a neuron by neuron
It's
explanation.
50-layer convolutional neural network with dropouts.
Yeah, that is not something that you need to say, but this is how the model was trained. It's the type of data that went into it at a very high level. I mean, the real goal and the real goal is, it's actually very similar, I think, to the credit example, is to empower users and consumers all over the place, us included, data scientists included, are the subject of these types of automated decisions more and more. And we as consumers and citizens are to some extent kind of losing control. It's very hard to understand what's happening. And so the point of these regulations is to try to give some sense of control. This is the decision that was made about you. This is how that decision was made. Basically, I think a good kind of rule of thumb is give people enough information so that they have some reasonable basis to say, I'm cool with that. I get it. I get that.
So Andrew, so a year from now, you're saying this will be implemented, but the reality is every website, every online mobile interaction you do involves ML and models. So how is that gonna play out? So does that mean when I go to a website, they have to disclose? I'm just trying to understand what's the implication.
Well, so there's a lot of nuance here. I think a good way to think about this is it's really only the most important automated decision-making systems. This is not like spam filtering. This is not,
again, one of these things that are hard to.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not, this is very far from straightforward.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I'm actually trying to make this as clear as humanly possible. There are other ways that I'm not trying to confuse you.
So in terms of mechanically inside the company, do you foresee this as this will be how it unfolds? So some subset in the legal counsel's team will decide, okay, so here are the models where we need to provide meaningful disclosure. these 10, and the rest of the other 1,000, we don't have to.
Yes, exactly. And I think and a kind of a prerequisite for that, which is very often lacking, is just kind of clear processes and documentation so that that discussion can happen. We very rarely see data scientists doing consistent documentation. And so, but that's exactly right. There needs to be a discussion where the data scientist and the legal counsel can say, okay, these are the models we actually need to be worried about. And this is what our worry should be.
So this is actually, to our listeners, this is actually good news for you, those of you who are building tools in ML ops and model governance and things like this. This is more, this is going to create more need on the part of companies, unless they want to build a lot of these model governance tools on their own. Speaking of which, Andrew, data scientists, let's close with talking about data scientists and their incentive structure, right? So not perfectly aligned with the topics we're talking about, responsible AI. So where are we, and what do you foresee is the impact of all of these things on the data scientist?
Yeah, I think honestly that is the central issue. And if I could boil it down to one question, I would say, whose job is ML risk? Who is responsible for managing the risks that come with the adoption of AI and machine learning? I think right now it is a very confusing environment. There are a lot of data scientists that think that their only job is to make models that are as accurate as possible, maybe transparent if they want to do some of that trade-off, but they want to optimize for accuracy. And they want to optimize for getting their model into production. And anything else is someone else's job. IT,
and
security.
that might be directly communicated to them in their performance reviews.
Exactly, and and sometimes that's actually true.
Right.
I think frequently they get very mixed messages, which is, we want to adopt AI, kind of go as fast as you can.
Right.
Very frequently, there's magic in the Python code,
someone above them has to set the tone, maybe.
I think someone above them has to set the tone. That said, though, I think that, there are a couple different solutions. I think with organizations that have more resources, there need to be kind of QA teams for ML that can do the validation and the testing and the evaluation that can be a little bit more directly responsible for some of these risks. I think from a legal standpoint, it's clear lawyers aren't wondering, what is their role, but frequently at incidents, many of our client engagements, there's a lot of confusion because data scientists want to get their models into production, and then even security, they tend not to think about AI and ML security as something that's really, part of their job. That's the InfoSec team. And so I think what we're seeing is there's a real issue. I think data science is growing up, it's maturing. And as part of that process, things need to be standardized, and it needs to be clear who is responsible for these risks. And so it doesn't mean that every data scientist needs to stop and suddenly take ownership of very difficult issues like algorithmic fairness. But what it does mean is that these discussions need to be had, and it needs to be clear, because I think what we see all over the place, and what I can tell everyone does not want, is to actually find out once an incident happens. Once something breaks, you don't want to be the data scientist who realizes, wait a minute, my organization actually,
built that
intentionally or by default made me responsible for algorithmic fairness. Because you can imagine what happens then.
I am aware, and this is very much in the handful, maybe one or two startups building tools around model governance that explicitly have these kind of checkpoints along the way, milestones, in paper trails. But it's very early days, and I wonder, Andrew, if you formally put some of these milestones along the way, that could it may not solve everything, but it gets people to pause and think and assess, right?
Yeah, the really good news here is that the ways, I don't want to say fix, that's too strong, but the ways to address a lot of these problems and to mitigate them are fairly intuitive, and they're not actually that hard. They're just kind of outside of the existing incentive structure. So yes, checkpoints, a little bit more clarity about who's responsible for what, a little bit more clarity about documentation and trying to enable things like reproducibility, which are core technical concerns that I think are actually growing in the ML community. So the challenges are really, really, really significant, and they're scary, but the actual kind of solutions, the way to help make a lot of progress, are fairly intuitive, and they're not that hard.
Yeah, I think the reproducibility, I think people are starting to get for a variety of reasons, including, I think, the growing recognition, as you pointed out, that a lot of these systems will break and fail, so you will need to debug and fix them. But I'm not sure if the tooling for those kinds of things explicitly bring up some of these risks that you pointed out, right? So it's mostly around we want a lot of these paper trails and reproducibility for technical reasons, not necessarily for some of these risks.
Yeah, I mean, and again, back to like when I'm reading these academic ML papers, research papers, for whatever reason, legal's role ends up being very kind of routinely ignored. I mean, I think it's just kind of a cultural disconnect. I think lawyers are intimidated by data scientists, and I think data scientists are probably intimidated by lawyers. I had someone very early on in my career tell me, basically said to me, if I have to wake up that, on any day and I have to talk to a lawyer before the day is over, it's a bad day. Like I don't want to talk to lawyers. And so I think there's some of that, just kind of a blind spot and a gap. So that's not to say that these governance tools are not great and shouldn't be adopted, but it is a point that you can't really get around these issues being very fundamentally legal,
Yeah.
especially if something bad happens.
I agree. I mean, I think that definitely there are legal issues. I guess my point with some of these tools is just to emphasize within the culture of data science that some of these things need to be taken more seriously, while simultaneously recognizing that these technical solutions are never going to be sufficient, right? So
exactly, yeah. And I mean, I would just say, like, I would flip that kind of anecdote on its head, and I would say, if you are a data scientist and you are thinking about these issues or worried about them, the sooner you have a conversation with your internal counsel, the better. Like no one should be surprised, if there are special requirements from the lawyers, or if something is concerning on the data science side. And so again, these conversations don't have to be that challenging. They just, they're just a little bit foreign and strange. And so I think they take some encouraging.
And with that, thank you, Andrew Burt. And as many of you listeners know, Andrew is a regular guest on this podcast, and he'll be back soon with another expert.
That sounds great. I'm already looking forward to it.
We're still in the process of identifying. So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.